Greetings, everyone. I hope you're fine. I hope you are doing well. I'm back again with another video. And if you like this type of content, I will appreciate if you can just smash the subscribe button, that like button, like never before. In this video, I'm going to talk about the challenges that South Africans are facing right now as we speak. I can talk about illegal immigrants, no work permit, no business permit, no passport, absolutely nothing. And again, one of the challenges that South Africans are facing right now is a high unemployment rate. And the other thing that South Africa is facing as well is spaza shops. Allegedly, children are dying as a result of food poisoning. These are the challenges that I'm going to talk about in this video. But my question is, are South Africans being xenophobic whenever they're trying to deal with these injustices or whenever they're trying to raise such issues?
Ziyakhala ke manje, ziyakhala abanikazi bemsebenzi sebayawavala ama-restaurant. They are closing restaurant now. In Limpopo, some restaurants are closing up. Johannesburg here, some restaurants are closing up. In Cape Town, you will hear it on the news. It's coming. Yes, le ndaba nizoyizwa kahle. You losers who are trying to force for employers to employ you, it's not going to work. Restaurants, business are closing up. Soon you hear Magan Beam is closed. I don't know where some of you are going to eat because you like to eat in restaurants alone. Now, hey, ziyakhala ke manje.
First of all, I would like to say this is the type of a highest arrogance that South Africans are always facing daily. They are always being told that you are lazy. But you are working hand in hand with a system to oppress South Africans. Because South Africans, since 1994, they've been busy fighting against white supremacy. But right now, it seems as if now we have another fight because we have illegal immigrants working hand in hand with these companies in order to oppress South Africans. Why? Because they don't want to follow law and order. First of all, whenever you try to raise these issues or to speak about these issues, people are like, or people are quick to say, we are Africans, we are in Africa, one Africa, and etc. and etc. But if you look the whole Africa, nobody cares. We have African unity, we have SADC, we have ECOWAS, we have all these bodies who are doing nothing to unite Africans. Me personally, I'm for African unity. But we have to understand that these people are not doing anything to unite Africans. Why? Because they care about themselves. They care about the positions that they are occupying. So that is why right now you cannot go to Zimbabwe and do as you please, because Africa is divided into categories, and each category has law and order. In other words, you have to follow their laws whenever you get there. We can talk about Nigeria. Nigeria is one of the strictest countries here in Africa. So the moment you go to Nigeria or the moment you land in Nigeria, that's when you start realizing that the South African law enforcement is very weak. Why? Because each and every category here in Africa has law and order. So in other words, if you move from Namibia to Nigeria, you move from South Africa to Uganda or to Ethiopia and so forth, you have to abide with their law and order. That's the most important thing. But now, right now, as we speak, it's like many people are taking advantage of the law enforcement here in South Africa. Because when it comes to South Africa, it's like it's a banana republic. But even though it is called banana republic, but we have to understand that there's law and order that has to be followed. So many people, because now are taking advantage of this law and order, they start thinking that they don't have to comply because they can see that there's a problem of law and order, or maybe South African law enforcement is weak. then they start taking advantage of that weakness. And there's a saying that says, a small hole not mended in time becomes a big hole much more difficult to mend. So these people now are used to this thing that South Africa is weak. So that is why the moment you start raising these issues, they are quick to say South Africa is xenophobic. Right now, as we speak, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger withdrew themselves from ECOWAS. Why? Because ECOWAS is doing nothing, not even to unite Africa, but to unite West Africa, to unite the economy of West Africa, is not doing anything. That is why ECOWAS is led by puppets, SADC is led by puppets, African Union is led by puppets. They are not doing anything to unite Africans, but instead they are working hand in hand with white supremacy. They are working hand in hand with the outsiders. So that is why Ibrahim Traore decided to walk out of ECOWAS. But it doesn't mean now I can move to Burkina Faso and say, you know what, I want to start a business in Burkina Faso, but I don't want to comply. I should not have a work permit. I should not have a business permit. I should not have or comply with all the requirements that you've put in place. In other words, I cannot do that at all, even though Ibrahim Traore is celebrated by almost all Africans. But the most important thing is that when I get to Burkina Faso, I have to comply. So in other words, people who are moving from Zimbabwe, Mozambique to come to South Africa, they have to comply, because right now as we speak, we are living in the times whereby Africa is divided according to categories. But they come from Zimbabwe and they come here in South Africa, or they move from Zimbabwe, they come here in South Africa and they want to act brave. But they don't want to act brave to face Mnangagwa and say, Mnangagwa, you have to empower our economy. The very same strength that we see in Johannesburg, that we see in Durban. This is what we want to see in Harare. This is what we want to see in Bulawayo. They are not doing that at all. But they are quick to say South Africans are lazy. But when their leaders, the likes of Mnangagwa and many others, are lazy to think, are lazy to work for their people. Same applies to Mozambique. That is why people are protesting right now in Mozambique, because they are like, we have to face the government. We have to face the government, because it seems that now the government is taking advantage of the people. So in other words, before we can talk about African unity, this is what we need. Everyone in their own countries, they should fight against the system, so that we can come together and say, you know what, now we have to come together. Because every time when people talk about Pan-Africanism, when people talk about we are Africans, yes, we are Africans and we are one, but they want South Africa to carry the burden, but knowing very well that the entire Africa is divided according to categories. Then they start playing this game that during apartheid, there are many people who went to other countries. They fled into those countries, running away from apartheid system, and etc. and etc. But those people, when they were living in those countries, they would comply with the law and order in those countries. When you move to Namibia right now from South Africa, you move from South Africa to Botswana, you have to comply. So right now we cannot take advantage and say, now Botswana has a new president and this new president loves Africans and etc. And we start trying to capitalize and say we don't have to comply. We don't have to follow the law and order. Each and every country in the world has a law and order. This is something which is very important that we need to understand. I believe that this is the type of arrogance that we don't need, because we have to reveal this arrogance or this type of arrogance to our own leaders to say, you know what, you have to make the changes. Because in order for Africa to be one, all these countries in Africa should contribute. But if South Africa is going to carry a burden, then it is going to be impossible for Africa to unite. So this is not being xenophobic. This is not xenophobia, but this is a fact that right now, as we speak, we are living in the system. Me personally, I don't like the Constitution of South Africa, but I have to comply with the rules and regulations. Whenever they say this is required, in other words, I have to make sure that I comply. That's the most important thing. There's absolutely nothing we can do. So same applies to these people who are coming here in South Africa. They have to comply. So now they are talking about these restaurants closing, these restaurants doing this. If these restaurants want to close, let them close, because now they are used to not complying. They are used to non-compliance. So as they are used to non-compliance, they want to gang up with illegal immigrants to oppress South Africans. We have people right now who are threatening the lives of South Africans. Should we be quiet? But at the same time, they want to sing this thing of Pan-Africanism. They want to sing this thing of African unity. We are all for African unity, but law and order has to be followed.
Expired. You left it at home. Work permit? You don't have work permit. Where are you from? Where are you from? Passport? Expired. Where are you from? Malawi. South African. Where are you from? Passport? Valid. Where's the work permit? You don't have. Where are you from? You have a passport. Expired and still no work permit. Passport expired, no work permit. Yes, chief? Where? Work permit? Passport expired. Wonderful. Yes, chief? Passport? Yes, chief, where are you from? No passport. No passport? From Zimbabwe also. Malawi. You don't have passport. Wonderful. Yes, chief? Passport? Just one thing. Work permit? Is the passport expired or not? It's not expired. When is it expiring? You only don't have a work permit. Fantabulous. Yes, chief? I do not from Malawi. Passport? Valid. Yes. Work permit? I don't have. Fantabulous. Listen to me, my good people. You shall follow me. I am the way.
South Africa has a planned high unemployment rate. So when you see people in South Africa being unemployed, everything is planned. So this is a sign. In other words, if a small company can hire about 10 to 20 undocumented employees, what should this tell you? It should tell you that unemployment is planned. It means if they can go to all these factories, all these companies, you'll discover that we have millions and millions of undocumented laborers working for those companies. So the moment you bring this issue, they are quick to say, you hate other Africans, you hate your brother, but you are not complying. You don't have a work permit, you don't have a passport, and you are working for someone who is also not complying, who's taking advantage of you, and at the same time working together with you to oppress South Africans. That is why I'm like, we have all these bodies here in South Africa, but they are not doing anything to protect South Africans. For an example, right now, you cannot go to Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traore is celebrated by almost all South Africans. But you cannot come to Burkina Faso and say, you know what, I want to invest, but I don't want to comply. I don't want to pay taxes. I have my own staff. I'm going to hire people from neighboring countries, and I'm going to pay them whatever I want. I don't want to comply. You cannot do that. This is what these companies here in South Africa are doing. They are like, no, we don't want to comply. And these political parties, they cannot talk about these issues because some of these political parties don't care about minimum wage. They don't care about minimum wage. And then at the same time, they are owning certain companies that are not complying. So that is why they are not talking about all these things, but because their priority is money, their priority is profit. So whenever South Africans stand up, they have to be silenced by threats. They have to be silenced that you are xenophobic. They have to be silenced by we are one Africans. So right now, I'm not talking about white people right now. I'm still talking about black people because I don't want to confuse these problems that we are facing right now in South Africa. So this means the government is like a referee. And the government of South Africa is unfair because this government of South Africa is not doing anything to say, you know what, let me penalize these companies because they are not hiring South Africans. So they should be asking themselves why South Africans are not being hired, why unemployment rate keeps on rising. They have to ask themselves that question, but they know what is happening. And now people from other countries are taking advantage of what is happening in South Africa because the law enforcement is weak. Right now, you cannot go to Zimbabwe and say, I'm black. You cannot go to Zimbabwe and say, we are Africans, but I'm not complying. Yes, we are Africans, but comply because we are still living under this system that was created by colonizers to divide us into categories. So each and every category has its own rules and regulations. And African unity is not doing anything. What can South Africa do? Because even South Africa is led by puppets. Mozambique is led by puppets. All these people are puppets. So as Africans, if we want African unity, we have to face our puppets in our countries. Then after winning that battle, then we can come and say, yeah, African unity is going to work. We should not talk about African unity whenever we are taking advantage of South Africans. This is the very same thing that is happening in America. There are, for an example, people who are moving from Asia, who are moving from South America, who are moving from Africa. And the moment they get to America, they are getting employed at the expense of African Americans. African Americans are always being excluded in their own country, in their own land where they were tortured, where they always face racism and etc. And they have their own unique history as well. But the government is corrupt. The companies are corrupt. They exclude them. Why they exclude them is because they don't want to pay taxes. Same applies to South Africa. They don't want to comply. These companies are focusing on profit. So in other words, now the government is a referee. So they have to see that, okay, this is a penalty. They have to see that, no, this is not good. Then at the end of the day, we'll end up fighting against one another as Africans. Why? Because of the leaders who are doing so, because of the companies who are doing so, who try by all means to divide Africans. And they use other Africans to fight against other Africans. Then South Africans should be silenced because they will say, we are xenophobic. They will say, we are like this. We don't like, but there's no country you can go to. It can be Angola, Uganda, Democratic Republic of Congo without proper documents. You have to produce the document. If you go to these countries, they are not like, oh, okay, you are African. They are like, do you have documents? So who is responsible to unite us? It's not an individual country. It's not one country, but it's all other countries. So other countries are quiet about African unity. So when you go to Nigeria, they don't talk about African unity. When it's only people who talk about African unity. Even if you can go to, for an example, a meeting maybe held by ECOWAS or a meeting that is held by SADC, they don't talk about these issues. That is why right now we don't have even, like, for an example, one currency here in Africa. Why don't we have one currency here in Africa? This is because these people don't care about African unity. Why we don't have one language that can be used as a business language or a communication language? Why? It's because these people don't care about African unity, and they've been there for a long period of time. For example, African Union or African unity has been there for a long time, but they haven't done anything about these issues of uniting Africa. So it's only people who are like, let's unite. But even if we can say, okay, let's come together, let's unite, the stumbling block will always be all these categories that are dividing Africa. Then at the end of the day, we start taking advantage of one another. When others are raising certain issues, we want to say they are being xenophobic. And we want to talk about African unity whenever we feel like we have to take advantage of this person. It should not be like that. We have to face reality. Thank you very much. I don't know what you think about this. I know we may not always agree, but the fact is South Africa is facing challenges that are planned. This is my perception. Thank you very much.